was on Sean Hannity's show last night talking more about that. He's the president of Judicial Watch. Listen to what he had to say.
It's astonishing and disturbing that these courts couldn't bother to hold hearings on spy warrants targeting Donald Trump. These courts that are supposed to provide oversight of the secret spy process refuse to do so. You've got the courts falling asleep at the wheel here. And, of course, you got the underlying corruption of the DOJ and FBI.
So, Ian, it sounds like no hearings and a lot of rubber stamping. Well, what do you make of this?
Well, look, this is the public's first real look into the FISA application process, but the lack of a hearing is not necessarily abnormal. There's no rule that requires the court to have hearings. In fact, it's discretionary within the court. That said, it's been reported that what usually happens is the DOJ lawyers and the National Security Division engage in a bit of back and forth with the court, with the staff of the court, to make sure that the application is buttoned up and passes court muster before they submit it. So that sort of takes the place of a hearing, supposedly.
So, but Ian, let me challenge that, because if in fact that may be the case, that there's not a lot of hearings, okay? And if there are not, well, let's say we're talking about surveillance of a suspected ISIS terrorist, there might not need to be a hearing, because we might have evidence at the Justice Department and the FBI that we got to go and stop a terror attack. In this case, we're talking about an American citizen in Carter Page. Let me basically turn it around on you. Shouldn't there be more of a check? Shouldn't there be hearings if an American, any American, a Democrat or Republican, is surveilled on by our government?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And look, this is one of the things that's in the Inspector General's broad mandate here, is to look at the FISA application process. And often when the Inspector General comes out with these kind of reports, he will recommend changes. This is what we should do. This is how we should do it better. And I think it's a great question, and I think it's something we should look at. Should there be hearings? Should there be more oversight? Should there be more protections? And I think we will have that debate in the coming months.
Ian, well, the president in the last couple of days has talked about maybe I should get involved. Maybe declassification should happen. We don't know a lot about this FISA process. Clearly, it was abused, or it seems to have been abused at some level. What can we do to bring transparency to this process to make sure it's not abused again, and people who abused it are held accountable?
Well, I'll say this about, the president's comments. I think you hear a lot of people, they talk about the Department of Justice like it's a fourth branch of government. It's not. All the executive power flows to the President of the United States. He delegates that power, he can take it back. And if he feels that something needs to be changed or that something needs to be declassified, that's a decision he has to make. And certainly this is an issue that is on the minds of a lot of people. It's currently being investigated by the Inspector General, and I think it is an important issue for people to look closely at.
Okay, look at it, but to follow up on one of Pete's questions there, and I know there's a lot we're throwing at you, so I understand we got to go through this piece by piece, but he said, what about holding people accountable? If there were Susan Rice or James Comey back in the last administration, hold them accountable if, and I underline if, there were abuses, but also move forward now. Why does Bruce Ohr still have a job at the Justice Department?
Well, let me say this. What Bruce Ohr did, back-channeling information from Christopher Steele to the FBI, was absolutely inappropriate. It was not his job. His portfolio was gangs and drugs, not counterintelligence. And even if it was counterintelligence, he was obviously conflicted. So he would have had to recuse himself.
Because his wife was working at Fusion GPS, and he maybe even had a financial interest in this, a conflict of interest, as you say. So let me go back to the question. Where's the accountability? How does he still have a job? Because you're admitting and acknowledging fairly that this was inappropriate. Why does he still have a job?
Well, I can tell you the leadership of this Department of Justice is going to follow the same process that they did when they fired Andy McCabe and Peter Strzok. They're going to let the Inspector General continue his investigation, submit a report. If that report shows that Bruce Ohr broke the law or broke department policy, I suspect he will suffer the same fate as Peter Strzok and Andy McCabe.
So you don't think he'll have a job in 6 months or a year?
I don't know. I have to see what the Inspector General report says. I know they're going to rely heavily upon that.
Would a declassification of the FISA applications be a national security problem?
Well, I think there's a lot of things to consider on that front. I think, first of all, the president needs to know that he has a rabid press corps that is waiting for him to do that, because they will attack mercilessly. But I think the bigger problem for the president here is if he does that and Democrats take the House in November, that is going to be a big problem for him politically coming up.
All right, Ian Prior, we appreciate you coming in.
Ian, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Ian gets to wear a beard. I can't.
No, it's coming
But
off.
he looks good.
We may stop him from leaving the D.C. bureau.
All right, well, he